She said she had cancer. Stage 3. Terminal. So I emptied my savings, sold my car, and gave up my future to save hers. Then I found out she never even saw a doctor. Backhand index pointing right, stay to the end, because the way I found out still makes my hands shake. It was 11:43 p.m. when the phone rang. That's the kind of time people only call with bad news. You don't dial someone just before midnight unless something's wrong, or about to be. My phone buzzed once, then again. MOM glowed across the screen. I hesitated. We weren't close anymore, not really. We had drifted. Years of distance disguised as polite holiday calls. She'd always been dramatic, always somehow the victim, always a reason why things were someone else's fault. But still. I picked up. Her voice was small. Smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Sweetheart," she whispered, then paused. I heard her swallow. "I didn't want to call you. I really didn't. But I don't know what to do." I sat up in bed, pulse already rising. "What happened?" Another pause. A shaky breath. "I have cancer." My heart stopped. It's stage 3. Maybe stage 4. I've been going through tests for weeks. I didn't want to tell anyone. I thought maybe it was a mistake. But they confirmed it today. My mind blanked. I couldn't even register which part of me was supposed to react first. Fear? Guilt? Rage? I just froze. "Jesus, Mom. Are you okay? Are you, what kind?" "Ovarian," she said. "It spread. They think it's in my lymph nodes." And then, as if the words themselves exhausted her, she went silent. I could hear the quiet hum of her breathing, uneven and tight. I don't remember everything I said that night. I think I cried. I think I told her I loved her. I think I promised things I didn't even understand. She said she was scared. Said she hadn't told my siblings yet, didn't want to panic them. Said I was the strong one, the grown-up now, the one she knew could handle the truth. And then she asked the question I was already bracing for. The tests and everything, they've been expensive. And I haven't even started treatment yet. I hate asking, I really do, but I don't know who else to turn to. I didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. How much? Looking back now, I wonder if that was the moment. The exact second she knew she had me. Not as a child. Not as a son. But as a wallet. A believer. A pawn. I transferred $4,800 the next morning. She said she'd need to start chemo within 2 weeks, that she was trying to get into a private program because the wait times were too long otherwise. She said it might buy her more time. Not a cure, but time. And who wouldn't pay for time? It felt like the least I could do. The very least. I canceled a trip I'd planned for months. Told my partner I needed to deal with family stuff. Postponed moving out of our tiny apartment because now rent needed to be secondary to hospital bills. None of it felt like a sacrifice. It felt like responsibility. It felt like what good sons do. Mom called me every other day after that. Always sounding tired, always thankful. Always beginning with, "I don't want to bother you, I know you're busy." And always ending with, "I'll pay you back someday, I promise. If I live long enough." Which hit harder than any invoice ever could. The next week, I sent another $2,000. Then $1,500 for transportation to chemo. Then $3,200 for alternative therapies the insurance won't cover. Then $900 for a wig, because she didn't want people to see her fall apart. I didn't question a thing. Because when someone says they're dying, you listen. You act. You give. I remember one call where she cried for 20 straight minutes. Just sobbed. Said she wasn't ready to go. Said she still had so much life left. Said the worst part was not knowing if she'd ever see grandchildren. If she'd ever sit through another Thanksgiving where we were all under one roof. Promise me you'll remember me when I'm gone, she whispered. And I swore it. Hand on my chest, tears on my face. I swore it. People talk about manipulation like it's loud. Like it's dramatic. Like it comes with blinking warning signs. But that's not true. Real manipulation is soft. It wraps around you like a blanket. It wears your love like armor. It uses your goodness against you. And I didn't see any of that yet. Not then. Because all I saw was my mother dying. And all I felt was the pull of history. She gave me life. She raised me. She deserves this help. Right? Right? One night, my partner gently asked me. Has she shown you any test results? Or even a treatment schedule? I remember flinching at the question. Like she'd insulted a sacred truth. Of course not, I snapped. She's sick, not organized. But even as I said it, something shifted. A flicker. A small, almost imperceptible crack in the wall I'd built around her story. That crack would grow. It would deepen. It would reveal something I wasn't ready to face. But in that moment, I still believed her. I still loved her. I still thought I was saving her life. It's incredible how fast your world can get smaller. Mine shrank in days. All the goals, plans, ideas I was working toward. They didn't disappear exactly. They just stepped aside. Quietly. Without resistance. Because when someone you love tells you they're dying, nothing else feels like it matters. I didn't announce it to friends or post anything online. There was no "pray for my mom" Instagram story. I kept it all tucked close to my chest, like if I said it out loud, it would become more real. Only my partner, May, knew everything. And even then, I filtered it. Filtered her panic. Filtered her hesitation. Filtered the look in her eyes when I told her I just wired another $3,000. Are you okay? She asked one night. We were sitting on the couch, a Netflix show playing, neither of us watching. I'm fine, I said. She needs me. That's what matters. But I wasn't fine. Not really. I started skipping therapy. I told myself I couldn't afford it anymore, even though my therapist offered sliding scale fees. The truth was, I didn't want to explain what I was doing. Didn't want to say the words out loud. I'm giving away everything I have to a woman who hasn't shown me proof she's even sick. Because that would sound insane. But insanity and loyalty often wear the same face when you're scared. I sold my car. A little blue Toyota I'd saved for in college. Reliable, clean, mine. Mom needed to front-load a payment for a rare hormone-based treatment. She said she couldn't get into the program without it. They don't take payment plans. You know how broken the system is. So I sold it. Took the bus to work. Told myself I was being noble. Told myself this was what sons did. I started turning down extra shifts. It didn't make sense, financially, emotionally, or practically. But I was afraid. Afraid if I wasn't by my phone, I'd miss something. An emergency. A hospital call. Her last breath. It sounds dramatic. But fear doesn't need to make sense to be real. She called me one night, crying. Said she was afraid the pain was getting worse. That the morphine patch wasn't working. That she couldn't sleep. That she didn't want to die alone. I asked her if she wanted me to fly home. No, she said. You're doing enough. You've done more than anyone. Then, softly. But if there's any way you could send just a little more, I'd be able to sleep knowing this week's covered. So I sent it. May tried to be patient. She was gentle. But I could feel the strain in her voice. Are you keeping track of how much you've sent her? I shook my head. That's not the point, I said. She looked at me then. Really looked. You haven't even seen one receipt. Not one doctor's note. Not even a photo of her at a clinic. I got defensive. Do you need receipts to care about someone? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because the question wasn't about love. It was about trust. And somewhere deep down, I was starting to wonder if those were still the same thing. My mom kept me updated through voice messages. I made it through the worst day yet. The nausea's brutal, but I'm staying strong. I think the tumor's responding. I can feel it shrinking. I saved every one. Played them back when I felt like I was drifting. They anchored me. Gave me purpose. It didn't matter if I couldn't afford rent next month. Didn't matter if I hadn't seen a friend in weeks. Didn't matter that I was falling behind on credit card payments. She was fighting for her life. That was the only headline I could read. And people started noticing. At work, I was quiet. Distracted. Burned out. At home, I was distant. Anxious. Barely eating. But everyone told me how strong I was. You're such a good son. She's lucky to have you. Not everyone would do what you're doing. I clung to those words like life rafts. Because they validated what I was doing. They made the cost feel righteous. They kept me from asking the questions that had started to bloom in the quiet spaces between her calls. Like, why hasn't she told my siblings yet? Why haven't they offered to help? Why does she always sound fine? Not just stable, but cheerful. Energetic. Sometimes even smug. I told myself cancer looks different on everyone. That maybe she was just good at hiding it. That maybe she was one of the strong ones. And that lie? It was easier to believe than the alternative. I kept sending money. Over $12,000 in less than 2 months. More than I'd ever given anyone. More than I could afford. But love doesn't run on math. It runs on hope. And I was so hopeful. Until the day she sent me a text that changed everything. Just 6 words. Starting chemo at Silvergrove Hospital today. My stomach flipped. Because I'd lived near Silvergrove for 3 years. And I knew exactly what it was. A physical rehab center. For orthopedic patients. No oncology department. No chemo wing. Nothing. It was just a text. 6 simple words. Starting chemo at Silvergrove Hospital today. If it had come a week earlier, I wouldn't have thought twice. I would have sent flowers, maybe another transfer. But that day, something in me paused. Silvergrove. I stared at the name for a full minute before the discomfort bloomed. I knew that place. Lived 10 blocks away from it during college. Drove past it every Sunday on my way to the grocery store. Silvergrove wasn't a cancer center. It wasn't a hospital at all. I Googled it, just to be sure. Silvergrove Rehabilitation Center, specializing in orthopedic recovery, post-surgery mobility, and geriatric physical therapy. No oncology department. No chemo ward. No affiliation with the medical groups she claimed to be part of. Just a rehab center, with a nice lobby and some overpriced vending machines. I tried to tell myself maybe she got the name wrong. Maybe it was an outpatient clinic attached to the same property. Maybe the chemo program was new. Maybe I didn't know everything. But then another voice chimed in, quieter, more dangerous. Or maybe, she lied. I sat with that thought like it was a bomb in my lap. Because if it were true, if she really was lying, then I hadn't just been generous. I had been manipulated. Weaponized. Used. And that realization isn't like a switch flipping on. It's like water dripping onto paper until the whole thing starts to dissolve in your hands. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I called Silvergrove directly. I pretended to be a concerned relative, which wasn't a lie. "Hi, I'm just checking to confirm whether my mother has an oncology appointment today." Her name is Evelyn, last name. The woman on the phone was polite, efficient. "Sir, we're a rehabilitation facility. We don't do any chemotherapy here." I waited. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "We don't have the infrastructure or licenses for that type of care." Her tone didn't change. But something inside me did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I scrolled back through every text she'd sent since the diagnosis. Every photo. Every dollar request. Every vague "doctor said it looks worse" message. And it all started to feel curated. Controlled. Like a script I was never supposed to read twice. I tried to find a prescription slip in the background of one of her photos, couldn't. Tried to look up the oncologist she named, no such doctor at that hospital. I asked her casually a few days later how the chemo made her feel. She said, "Oh, I'm really sore. My knees hurt the most." My knees. Not her stomach. Not her bones. Not even fatigue. Her knees. I googled chemo side effects again that night. Sore knees weren't on any list. The more I looked, the more the story unraveled. Like a sweater that was never really whole to begin with. Then I found the photos. She didn't know I followed her second Facebook profile, the one she only used to comment on friends' vacation posts and post memes about wine o'clock. She must have thought I didn't see it. But there they were. 3 pictures posted during the same week she told me she was in bed all day with post-chemo nausea. 1, at a wine tasting with 2 friends, holding a glass and grinning. 2, sitting at a brunch spot in a new outfit, captioned, "Treating myself to some sunshine." 3, her getting a pedicure, smiling with her feet in a tub, tagged at a high-end spa. My throat closed. I kept looking at the images, trying to make them mean something else. Maybe they were old. Maybe someone else uploaded them. Maybe. No. They were tagged. Dated. Geolocated. There was no maybe. She wasn't fighting cancer. She was shopping. She was brunching. She was faking. I didn't tell anyone. Not May. Not my friends. Not my siblings. I needed to sit with it first. I needed to be sure. Because the alternative, that my own mother would fake a terminal illness to drain my life savings. That wasn't something I could just say out loud. That wasn't a story you share. That's a wound you measure first. I started taking screenshots. Saved the posts. The texts. The wire transfers. I called the pharmacy she mentioned using for her anti-nausea meds. They had no record of her as a customer. None. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because this wasn't about confrontation anymore. It was about confirmation. I needed to see it in her face. Needed to hear it in her voice. Because some part of me, some dying part, still wanted it not to be true. So I planned a visit. Told her I'd be in town. She didn't sound happy. "I don't look great, honey. The chemo's rough. Maybe we should wait." I told her I'd booked the flight already. "I just don't want you to see me like this," she said. And that was the first honest thing she'd said in weeks. Because the truth? She didn't want me to see her at all. I didn't tell her the exact day I'd be arriving. I said I had a few meetings nearby and might drop in sometime that week. She sounded panicked but masked it under concern. You don't need to see me like this, she said again. It's bad. Really bad. I told her I'd bring groceries and leave them on the porch if she wasn't up for talking. That's sweet, she said, voice tight. But unnecessary. She was slipping. I could hear it in her tone. The way her words bent under pressure, more defensive than deflated. Less like someone in pain, and more like someone trying to stay in control. I knew that tone. I'd grown up under it. I flew in on a Thursday morning and went straight to her place. No text. No warning. Just a cab, a box of groceries, and my breath held so tightly it hurt. Her car was in the driveway. The lights were on. The curtains were open. But no sign of illness. No walker. No medical equipment. No evidence of someone mid-chemotherapy. Just wind chimes. Flower pots. A new garden gnome I hadn't seen before. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. Then I rang the bell. The door opened a crack. She looked at me like I was the one faking something. Her hair was perfect. Roots freshly dyed. Skin glowing, makeup flawless. Not a trace of fatigue. And she was wearing heels. Heels. James, she said, eyes darting behind me as if she were searching for a camera crew. Why didn't you tell me you were coming today? I held up the grocery bag. Just wanted to surprise you. How are you feeling? She hesitated. Her hand still holding the door, body blocking the inside. Tired. Really tired. It's been rough. She moved to hug me, but it was awkward. Hesitant. Like she didn't want me too close. Like she was afraid I'd smell the lie on her skin. When she let me in, I saw the first crack. The dining table was covered in shopping bags. Nordstrom. Sephora. A new iPad box. Not a single pill bottle. No med sheets. No insurance forms. No hospital brochures. Nothing. The kitchen counter had a receipt from a spa. Date stamped 2 days prior. Her name on it. Deluxe facial and oxygen infusion. Chemo patients don't get facials. She tried to distract me. Offered coffee. Asked about May. Pretended everything was fine. But her eyes wouldn't meet mine. And I couldn't play dumb anymore. So I asked. When's your next round of treatment? She blinked. Monday. Where? The place I told you. Silver Grove. The rehab center? Silence. She turned toward the sink. Fumbled with a mug. Bought herself seconds. They partner with a mobile clinic, she said. It's a new program. They told me they don't treat cancer patients. Her hands froze. You called them? Yes. She put the mug down. Turned to face me fully. Arms crossed. Eyes narrowed. The shift happened fast, like flipping a switch from weak mother to cornered operator. Why would you call them, James? Because none of this adds up. Because I've sent you thousands of dollars. Because you said you were dying. My voice cracked on that word. Not because I was angry. But because I was heartbroken. She sat down at the table and sighed, long and theatrical, like she was the one exhausted by all of this. I was going to tell you. Tell me what? That it's not as bad as I thought. You told me it was stage 3. You told me it spread to your lymph nodes. You told me you didn't know if you'd make it to Christmas. She didn't answer. So I asked the question I had rehearsed in my head 100 times. Did you ever have cancer? Her silence was the answer. Not the kind of silence that searches for words. The kind that calculates how much you've already figured out. And when she finally spoke, the words weren't an apology. They were a justification. I was scared, she said. I didn't know how to ask for help. You never answered my calls. You've been distant for years. I didn't know how else to reach you. I just stared at her. So you invented a terminal illness? She flinched. But only a little. You wouldn't understand. I raised you alone. I gave everything to this family. And now, I needed help. So you lied. You stole. It's not stealing if it's from your mother. And that? That was the moment the switch flipped in me. Because up until that second, some part of me was still waiting to wake up. Still hoping for a confession. A breakdown. A flicker of the mother I thought I knew. But now I saw her clearly. Not as a mother. Not as a victim. But as a woman who believed that love meant ownership. That family meant leverage. That I was a resource, not a son. I stood. Didn't say much. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just said. You didn't need to lie to get help. But you chose to. And now, I choose this. And I walked out. I didn't contact her for 3 days. No calls. No texts. Nothing. Not because I was punishing her. Not because I wanted her to wonder where I was. But because I needed that silence, for me. Because up until now, this had all been her story. Her illness. Her panic. Her desperation. But after that visit, after seeing the spa receipts, the lies, the ease in her eyes when she spun excuses. This stopped being her narrative. And it became mine. I spent the next day going through my bank records. Every transfer. Every note. Every message that went with it. $18,927. That's how much I'd sent since the day she said the word cancer. That number hit differently when written out. Not in emotion. Not in memory. But in black and white bank statements, with timestamps and locations and receipts. I kept it all. Screenshots. Emails. Call logs. The spa photos. The Facebook posts. The recording of our final conversation. Because I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. May was the first person I told everything to. We sat at the kitchen table late one night, my laptop glowing between us, documents open like open wounds. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just listened. And when I was done, she asked one thing. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer her. Not right away. Because what do you do when the person who gave you life fakes their own death sentence just to rob you emotionally and financially? There's no manual for that. No hotline. No closure letter template. You have to write it yourself. So I started writing. Not a message to her. A message to everyone else. My siblings. Our extended family. The ones who had been praising her strength and my support. The ones who asked, "Why don't you visit your mother more?" The ones who said, "She gave you everything." They deserved to know the version I'd seen. I composed one email. Calm. Direct. No theatrics. I didn't accuse her of anything. I just laid out facts. The date she said she was diagnosed. The money I sent. The spa trips, brunches, and non-existent hospital visits. A screenshot of the text saying she was getting chemo at a rehab center. And a short audio clip from our last talk, the part where she said, "It's not stealing if it's from your mother." I didn't comment on that line. I let it echo by itself. I ended the email with one sentence. I don't expect you to take sides, just to know the truth. And I hit send. 2 days later, she called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted. What did you do? I didn't reply. She called again. Left a message. The voice was different now. Not scared. Not broken. But angry. You had no right. You embarrassed me. You made it look like I used you. I'm your mother. You fix things privately, not like this. That was the last message I ever saved. Because it proved exactly what I needed it to. She never said she was sorry. She never said she lied. She never even tried to explain. All she cared about was how it looked. But what she didn't realize. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a boundary. The ripple effect came fast. My sister emailed back one line. I always knew something was off. One cousin called me in tears, saying she'd given mom money too, not as much, but enough to feel sick about it. A friend of the family sent me a screenshot of a group chat mom was in, where she talked about using a story to pull my kids close again. Her words. Her spelling. Her betrayal. I didn't take her to court. Didn't file a fraud report. Didn't try to claw the money back. Because what she took from me wasn't just cash. It was trust. And no court in the world gives that back. Instead, I wrote her a letter. Not to be kind. But to be final. I'm glad you're not sick. I'm glad you're not dying. But this will be the last thing I ever give you. Not because I hate you. But because I love myself too much to let you do this again. You made me choose between my future and your illusion. So now, I choose me. I sealed the letter. Mailed it. Deleted her number. And for the first time in months, I exhaled. Because peace doesn't always come when you forgive someone. Sometimes it arrives when you finally stop waiting for them to become who they pretended to be. If I thought the hardest part was confronting her, I was wrong. The hardest part came after. In the silence. In the comments. In the well-meaning messages from people who only knew one version of her. The curated one. At first, my email hit like a match. People reached out. Quietly. Carefully. Some with confusion. Some with solidarity. A few with their own stories, small loans that were never paid back, strange excuses, a growing sense that something was always off. But within a week, the tone began to shift. Not from those who knew me well. But from the ones who carried legacy like a shield. Aunts. Uncles. Family friends. Old neighbors. People who had known her since she was Evelyn the single mom, Evelyn who worked 2 jobs, Evelyn who gave up everything for her kids. The messages weren't cruel. That's what made them harder to shake. They were gentle. Wrapped in nostalgia. Dripping in should. She made mistakes. But she's still your mother. What if she really was scared and didn't know how to say it? Families fight. But at the end of the day, blood is blood. You're better than this. Be the bigger person. And the classic. She won't be around forever. Every one of those messages carried the same undercurrent. You are responsible for her feelings, even after she broke your trust. And that's when I realized something. The world doesn't know what to do with parents who lie. We're trained to see parental love as unconditional. We're told they did their best. We're warned not to judge them for what they couldn't give us. But no one teaches us how to protect ourselves when love becomes a weapon. May watched it unfold. She saw me retreat from texts. Delay responses. Sit longer in the dark. One night, I came home to find dinner on the table and a candle flickering low. She poured wine. Said nothing. Just waited. When I finally looked up from my plate, I said, "Maybe I should have just let it go." She didn't blink. Why? Because it's over. Because she's not dying. Because people think I overreacted. May leaned forward. You didn't overreact. You responded. You protected yourself. You told the truth. I exhaled, shakily. But it's like, if I'd just eaten the lie, smiled, kept the peace, no one would be mad. She nodded slowly. Of course. Because you'd still be suffering invisibly. And that's easier for people to ignore. Her words hit like a mirror. Because for months, I had been suffering quietly. Sending money. Losing sleep. Shrinking. And no one said a word then. But the moment I said, enough. Suddenly I was the villain. I read that letter she left me years ago. The one where she said, "I raised you to always choose kindness." I folded it and put it back in the drawer. Because this wasn't about kindness. This was about boundaries. People confuse the two all the time. They think forgiveness means access. That letting go means letting back in. But I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even waiting for an apology. I was just done. A cousin reached out around that time. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. He said, "I don't know all the details. But I remember how she treated you growing up. And if this is your line, I respect it." That message stayed with me. Because it reminded me that not everyone needs a spreadsheet of pain to validate your decision. Sometimes they just see you clearly. Sometimes that's enough. I stopped replying to the guilt-laced messages. Not with hate. Just with silence. Because I owed no one my pain. Especially not people who showed up only to shame the way I processed it. Mom never responded to the letter I sent. Not with a call. Not with a text. Not with another lie. Just, nothing. And that was its own kind of answer. I wondered if she was waiting for the dust to settle. If she assumed time would soften me. But I wasn't hard. I was whole. For the first time in a long time. I got a new job. Something more stable. Something that paid what I deserved. Something that let me sleep again. May and I moved into a new apartment. Smaller kitchen. Bigger windows. We painted the walls ourselves. Picked colors that felt like us, light green, dusty blue, warm beige. No one told me healing would look like choosing your own color palette. But it does. I stopped tracking the money. I let it go. Not because it wasn't real. But because I didn't want my life defined by a ledger of betrayal. I wanted it defined by what I did after. There was no grand finale. No final argument. No dramatic send-off where I screamed everything I wanted to say while she begged me to stay. It just ended. Quietly. Permanently. And that silence? It healed me more than any apology ever could. I didn't block her number. I just stopped answering. Not out of spite. But because I didn't want to give her another version of me to manipulate. Not the angry son. Not the hurt son. Not even the sad one. I didn't want to offer her any more versions of me at all. In the months that followed, something strange happened. The world didn't end. My heart didn't implode. I didn't collapse from guilt. Instead, I got better. I started sleeping again, really sleeping. The kind where you wake up and don't check your phone for bad news. The kind where your body finally believes it's safe. I stopped budgeting like a man under siege. I could buy groceries and not wonder who would need saving next. I could send May flowers without guilt. I was for the first time in years, my own person again. No strings. No alarms. No lies. Just me. I started journaling, not to document pain, but to remember peace. At first, I didn't know what to write. I kept reaching for old habits. Rants. Regrets. Postmortems. But eventually, the pages softened. I started writing what I noticed. The sun hit the windows at 8:12 a.m. I made coffee. It didn't taste like guilt. May laughed so hard today she snorted. I want to remember that sound. I feel empty, but not hollow. There's a difference. And that difference became the foundation for everything that came next. My sister reached out a few weeks later. She wasn't defensive. Just curious. Did she ever say why she did it? I told her the truth. She said I didn't answer her calls. That this was the only way to get me back. My sister paused. Then said something I'll never forget. Then maybe the silence was the first boundary she ever heard. There was one more letter. From her. Mailed to our old address. Postmarked 5 weeks after my last email. May opened the mailbox. Brought it in. Placed it on the table. No return address. Just her handwriting, delicate, like always. We stared at it for a long time. Then I picked it up. Didn't open it. Just held it. It felt heavier than it looked. Like it contained everything I never got, and everything I no longer needed. I set it down. We didn't talk about it again. A week later, it went into the recycling bin, unopened. Because forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes it just needs space. And that's what I gave myself. Space to think without flinching. To trust without calculating. To build a life that didn't orbit someone else's chaos. I started volunteering at a crisis center. Helping people set boundaries. Helping people learn how to say no without apology. How to love without self-destruction. How to identify when I need you becomes I'm using you. Because if there's one thing I know now, it's that pain needs a voice. Otherwise, it becomes a pattern. I didn't erase her from my memory. She's still there. In my smile. In my stubbornness. In the way I tie my shoes without untying them first, something she used to scold me for as a kid. But she's no longer at the center. She's just a page I turned. Some people say cutting off family is cruel. They say it's ungrateful, ungracious, unnatural. But I say this. What's cruel is letting someone burn you over and over again just because they lit your first candle. I walk lighter now. May says she can feel it when I enter a room, like I'm no longer carrying invisible anchors. She's right. Because I stopped carrying a lie. And in that space, I finally started carrying myself. People talk about love like it's always a blessing. A birthright. A bond. A cure. They say, a mother's love is forever. Family love never fades. Love makes you whole. But what no one prepares you for is when love becomes the thing that breaks you. I used to think love was measured by what you were willing to give up. Your time. Your comfort. Your dreams. Maybe even your truth. But now I know better. Real love doesn't ask you to become less of yourself just to be enough for someone else. Real love doesn't wear a mask and call it mercy. Real love doesn't fake an illness to feel important. What she did wasn't just a lie. It was a performance designed to weaponize the one thing she knew I wouldn't question. My loyalty. She didn't need cancer to hurt me. She only needed my heart. And that's what makes it unforgivable. Not because I'm bitter. But because I refuse to pretend it didn't matter. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering without reopening the wound. And some people don't understand that. They think forgiveness means dinner invitations, holiday reunions, a cheerful, we all make mistakes. But I don't need to hold someone's hand again just to prove I've let go. Sometimes the greatest act of forgiveness is choosing to move forward without revenge. I haven't seen her in over a year. Not at weddings. Not at holidays. Not in passing. I don't know if she's sick now, or if she ever will be. But I do know this. If she ever reaches out again, I will not answer. Not because I'm cruel, but because I've built a life where her voice no longer echoes in my decisions. There's peace in that. The kind of peace you earn, not inherit. The kind of peace that grows slowly, like moss on a stone that's finally stopped rolling. May and I adopted a dog. His name is Casper. He's nervous around loud voices and sleeps with his nose tucked under the blanket. He doesn't care about family trees or legacy or blood ties. He just wants to be near kindness. I think that's a lesson I wish I had learned sooner. I once asked myself if I'd ever love her again. If the memory of her holding my hand as a child could be enough to soften what came after. The truth? I don't know. Maybe part of me always will. But it will be the part that loves a version of her that never really existed. The version who wouldn't lie. Who wouldn't use cancer as a weapon. Who wouldn't turn her child's love into leverage. And that version? She only lives in memory. Not in reality. Sometimes healing isn't about rebuilding what was broken. Sometimes it's about leaving the ruins behind and walking forward into a life where you're no longer the one apologizing for the fire. People don't like when survivors speak clearly. They want nuance. They want softness. They want you to say, it wasn't all bad. But here's what I'll say. It wasn't all bad. But the parts that were bad? They were devastating. And they deserve to be named. I don't hate her. I just don't need her. And that difference? That's what freedom feels like. You don't have to justify why you walked away from someone who was hurting you. You don't need to itemize your wounds to make your distance valid. And you're not heartless for choosing silence over one more chance to be manipulated. Letting go isn't easy. But holding on to someone who keeps cutting you? That's far harder. So here I am. Still standing. Still breathing. Still soft, but no longer blind. Still capable of love, but no longer for sale. And I hope, wherever she is, she finds the peace she couldn't find through control. Because I already found mine. It didn't come from revenge. It came from release.